Hello everyone and welcome to my Frankenstein setup video. This video goes maybe against some of what you've heard before, but a lot of healing guides seems to suggest that the only 4 sets used by healers ever is going to be Olorime, Worm, Sanctuary or Jorvulds, and while I agree that Jorvulds and Olorime are some of the best and most popular sets in the game, when it comes to raiding, especially endgame raiding, sometimes you have to compromise to achieve what you want to do, and it just happens that when you're raiding in ESO, what is the most important thing is DPS, and this is why the term Frankenstein Builds comes up. This is sort of a term that I thought of in my head, because these are sort of the builds that comes from setups that used to be worn by a tank, sort of transferred to the healer role, and this is done exclusively just to increase the DPS of the group. And I wanted to make this video to show the best possible setups for these builds, to sort of allow the ideas and so on to trickle down to some of the people that might not actually know how to set these sort of builds up and why they're used, mainly to explain why we would use something like this. So the first setup I'm going to go through is Eben. Now this particular setup is for Cloud Rest +3 group healing, and for this setup I would use a particular food called Ghastly Eyeball. Now this is a food that gives you mainly Magicka and Magicka recovery. So when you set up something like a heavy or medium set, you want to reach the 5 piece bonuses for your magic, for your light armor. Now this is not as necessary because it's only crit and spell penetration, but you still want it. So what you want to do is you want to wear 2 heavy on your biggest body pieces if possible. Then you want to farm light monster sets and then transmutated jewelry. Now the cool thing about Eben and the Ghastly Eyeball is that you're sitting at about 18k HP with Eben, which is going to have 100% uptime, and you're actually not suffering at all in your Magicka or Magicka recovery pool because of this. So this is a really smart setup for Eben, since we are effectively turning the bad health bonuses and healing taken bonuses into max Magicka bonuses, and that's sort of cool. So you won't actually feel it too much when you're wearing Eben like this. And this is also why it's chosen in Cloud Rest. Now in Cloud Rest, the reason why we're wearing Eben and the group healer is simply that tanks are going kind of all over the place, and the healer, especially the group healer, will always be with the group. So this way you ensure a high uptime. Secondly, it allows the tanks to use something like Turks, all 3 of them. Whereas before, if main tank was wearing Eben, he had to wear Alkosh, so he couldn't wear Turks, and this way you would have overlapping crushes that weren't the same potency, and that meant that DDs would have a hard time setting up their penetration. By putting the healer on Eben, then suddenly the tanks have more options. So the second setup is Hercene, which I believe is a very underrated set. Now if you put on the right food, then we'll reach the right HP. Hercene is a set that gives you your group stamina recovery, or actually not, it gives your stamina DDs sustain. Now this is a set that I believe has been very underrated, but it's been picked up a lot lately. The thing about sustain is that in most situations it will translate directly into DPS. Now in a progression group where you might be doing Maul or Hoff for the first time, sustain is literally gonna turn into damage, because the DDs might have issues sustaining through longer fights, or they might be less experienced with that rotation and make mistakes. Now this is going to compensate them a lot. 4% reduction is a lot, and for later raids where the DDs know their rotation better and the fight times are getting shorter, something like Bash Weaving is going to cost a lot on their sustain, but percentage reduction is never going to be negated. So no matter which level you're playing, this is always going to translate directly into DPS. And I believe Hercene, personally, is the best alternative to Jorvulds there is. I actually believe if you ever choose Jorvulds, always consider, could I wear Hercene on this fight? Now of course you have to consider how many magic DDs you might have that do not benefit, but I believe Hercene is a very potent alternative to Jorvulds, and I believe right now it is the best group support set in the game, as long as you have, of course, 8 stamina DDs. Now again, we wear this set by wearing the 2 big body pieces and transmutated jewelry. Now I chose this fight, the AG fight, to represent it with the recognized sentinel mask, which also gives your group stamina recovery. So this is what a Hercene setup would look like. Now of course Hercene has to be double barred, a bit like Infallible Aether, so you have to consider that as well when you're wearing it. If you're wearing it with Olorime, it's no problem because you can just back bar Olorime. Now the third set I want to talk about is Turok's Pact, which has gotten a bit more popular this patch. This particular setup is a Frankenstein setup, so you see me wearing something like the Zagras, and maybe I would put on something like this Serpent Stone, but Turok's is mainly used for one thing, and that's keeping up Crusher. So this particular setup is, like I said, VAS Frankenstein, and this set is really only popular because of the nerfs to the front bar enchants. So I believe again this, just like Hercene, is a setup that should be used all the way through. You should really consider this setup, because something like a half potent Crusher is a huge DPS loss. So by being a healer, providing this, you are actually giving a lot more damage to the group than you might think. Something like a backbar Turok instead of backbarring Jorvulds is way more damage. Just reaching something like 30-40% more Crusher uptime is way more than you will ever provide with your major force bar from Jorvulds. You of course have to communicate with your group and say, okay, I'm using this setup so that the tanks know, and a perfect place to use Turoks would be something like a twins fight. So this is a twins setup. You see me wearing Olorime backbar. Now I would be providing this to both groups. The other healer were providing Infallible Aether, and then I'm double barring Turoks while using Crush on both my weapons. Now these are not Turok's weapons, so you have to have an Asylum Staff and an Olorime Staff with Crusher. But this is a very good example of when you can use Turoks, because Turoks could have been used by the tanks on twins with no problem. Like, you're splitting the groups up and providing the Crusher to each boss. The tanks won't have much issue backbarring Crusher and just keeping up 100%. But the interesting thing about twins is that the group is so split up that something like Powerful Assault suddenly becomes an option. Now you could wear Powerful Assault on your healer again, but why would you when you can wear light Turoks and just have the tanks provide the Powerful Assault? The reason why you want the tanks as well providing Powerful Assault is that the healers aren't necessarily on the same side. So by putting Powerful Assault on the tanks, you have tanks providing Powerful Assault easily to 2 groups of DDs, while the healers might not be on the same side. They can still provide Crusher to each of their bosses. Now this requires some skill in light attacking and tracking, but it's a very potent alternative, and it's like this has a lot to do with why twins fight are getting shorter and shorter among in-game groups, because the healers are providing the Crusher. The tanks can provide almost 100% Powerful Assault off either on their sides, something a healer could not do. So this is just my my quick video on some of the sort of Frankenstein setups. There are a lot more. I could go into detail about meritorious service and so on, but these are sort of the setups I believe can trickle down to more groups more in the progression state, and I think especially Hercene and Turoks and Eben should be considered among groups who might not be as experienced, because these sets are very powerful if they're applied the correct way. These are just examples, but there are several fights where you can use these different setups, and it might be a good idea if you're a new healer to go out, farm them, and then suggest using them to your raid leader and communicate of course with your tanks and the other healer and say, Are there any ways we can apply this, and how much impact do we believe it'll have? I certainly believe that these setups can help a lot of groups achieve achievements they might not else have been able to.